Hello, friends. Bible study, NIV, John, chapter 2, 12 through 25. This one's Jesus clears the temple. After this, he went down to Capernaum with his mother and brothers and his disciples. Okay? There they stayed for a few days. When it was almost time for Jewish Passover, Jesus went to Jerusalem. In the temple courts, he found men selling cattle, sheep, and doves, and others sitting at tables exchanging money. So he made a whip of cords and drove all from the temple area, both sheep and cattle. He scattered the coins of the money exchangers and overturned their tables. To those who sold doves, he said, "Get these out of here. How dare you turn my Father's house into a market?" His disciples remembered that it was written, "Zeal for your house will consume you." Will consume me. Then the Jews demanded of him, "What miraculous sign can you show us to prove your authority to do all this?" So understand that this zeal and passion is not just triggering the disciples to remember this, but other people around them, because this is a time period in which there are a lot of false messiahs coming in. Usually false prophets is how that it's going to, because it's always been, people knew that the Messiah would be a prophet, because every one of their leaders who could, in their warrior king world, wield the Ark of the Covenant were prophets. They all had the ability to have visions. They were psychics. It's just they're prophets because they're listening directly to the Lord, not just picking up some general broadcast. Jesus answered them, "Destroy this temple, and I will raise it again in 3 days." Then the Jews replied, "It has taken 46 years to raise this temple, to build this temple, and you're going to raise it in 3 days." But the temple he had spoken of was his body. After he was raised from the dead, his disciples recalled what he had said. Then they believed the scripture and the words that Jesus had spoken. Now, while he was in Jerusalem at the Passover feast, many people saw the miraculous signs he was doing and believed in his name. But Jesus would not entrust himself to them, for he knew all men. He did not need man's testimony about man, for he knew what was in man. Now there's a couple of different things, because we're going to focus a lot down there. We talked about the money changing hands thing when we went over it in Luke. So again, the doves as a sacrifice were meant so nobody would have to buy them from somebody else. They weren't having to be expensive, because the doves were out in nature. It meant go catch them. Go catch them so you could go do your penance, because you had to put work into it. And by being able to buy them and buy them at the temple, so you don't have to go chase anything. You don't have to do the work of penance. You don't have to try to keep any of this stuff. You can just give money, assuming that that was meant to be a case of, if nothing else, worse comes to worse and you just don't have it in you to be able to go do that, you have this as a last resort. Because the sacrifice of the animals, because if you go back into the Old Testament, when they were sacrificing these animals, they're tossing their blood all over the tabernacle. So it's supposed to be, don't sin, because if you do sin, you have to sacrifice an animal, and that's supposed to impact you, that something else is getting hurt for what you did, because you're supposed to be understanding the exchange, that we don't live in a vacuum. Every choice of what we decide to do or not do affects other people around us. It creates a ripple of energy. Your negativity can hurt other people even if you don't say anything to them, because your bad mood can put other people in bad moods. But your good energy can put people into amazing places, and you can pull people out of negativity by putting your good energy into the world. Right? So it's all a choice of how you're going to handle. Are you going to have integrity? It's meant to inspire integrity, but they've turned it into a money changing hands for sin. He doesn't, of course he's not going to like that. That's not how it works. If you're not making a change to your daily life after you realize that you've done something that you're supposed to be doing so that you don't do that thing again, you're not alchemizing the wound. You're not ascending. You're not becoming a better person. All of it is meant to help you become a better person. So if it's taking you down roads in which you are harming others, then you're not following the right path. You're listening to the opposition, and you need to realign yourself with the love vibration, because that's what he's trying to get you to be, the best person that you can be in any one given moment. And that's really all you're going to be able to handle. And then it's also in this thing to understand that emotions are not bad. How you express the emotions and the purpose behind expressing the emotions matters. Jesus is angry for what's being desecrated in his Father's house, the lack of intention. God was angry with how this was being handled in the first place, because it wasn't. People weren't becoming better people. The opposite was happening, and it was very savage during that time period of history everywhere. Not just in this place, but everywhere in the world, because people were more animal still than human. You have to try to think of it like the evolution of not just becoming flesh to human state, but soul to human state. Because that's what we're doing when we're fighting our more basic instincts to treat people as if they're not our adversary, but our friend. Because this is what we're supposed to be doing in the first place. Now down here at the very bottom, what Jesus did not entrust himself to them, because he could see into the heart of man. He saw their intentions behind their words. There was reading the energy behind the energy. This is an instinct we all have. It's baked into us. We call it our gut intuition. And again, it's okay. We even admire people who follow their gut. We just don't all acknowledge that we have it. He speaks to us through it. He'll use whatever energy is around to make us understand better. So follow those gut instincts. If something feels exceptionally wrong, it's wrong. You don't need to have any other reason for it. He's let you know it's wrong. It's only when you try to find ways to justify the I don't want to that you end up getting into murky grounds. You don't need to. If it doesn't feel right to you, honor those emotions. It doesn't feel right to you. And move on. Anybody who tries to force it means that, they don't really respect you as a person. Anyway, giant red flag. Giant red flag. If they don't respect your decisions or your right to be not wanting to. The other part there is Jesus did not entrust himself to them. What does that mean? Well, in the previous history of these people, a prophet arises as a judge. In fact, it's the Judges, the book of Judges in there, until because they were in people where prophets were judges, until they started going down the path of kings instead. It's just a break in how they were handling the governorship of their peoples. But historically, when they're oppressed, because the kings become kings because they rise up and they help fight a big adversary like any other country, right? Because that's just how the history of the world at large chose who was to be their ruler, was the mighty and the strong. anywhere you look in history, you can find it that way. In this instance, they were looking for him to be the prophet instead of the king, because this king route has not gotten some of them so well. Now they got Romans and a puppet king, and they don't like that idea. They're anti, monarchy at this moment. It's not really, Rome's not a monarchy, but in that time frame. But they're anti that. They don't want any more of that. They're like, man, we miss the good old days when we had those judges and those prophets. But to come up and say you're a judge and a prophet, they call you a heretic and then they burn you. So nobody wants to do this, because why would they? It was as dangerous to be a prophet in the Jewish culture at that time as it was to be a witch in Salem. So you're not gonna say that, even if you have those abilities. You're going to be very terrified to display them, because they will get you killed. So you can't just display them. So that's why he could not have become that prophet, wielder of the Ark of the Covenant, which at this point I don't think it's even in Jerusalem anymore, actually. And because it was taken by the Babylonians. If you go into the Psalms and listen to David, not all the Psalms are written by David, but that Davidic style of music, poetry, they talk about how the Ark of the Covenant was taken and defiled by the Babylonians, which was the ancient name for the Iraqis, if you only know the modern names over there. So, he was not going to become that prophet, warrior, king. It doesn't mean that he couldn't have been. Just he also knew that, one, that wouldn't fulfill the scriptures. And two, because if you look at it in one way, they all think he's going to be a warrior king, and there must be something in that language that tells him that's going to be. Right? But they're making an assumption because that's what had always come before. So he wasn't going to be that. He'd seen what had happened that way. He knew he was going to die one way or the other. And it was really going to be a case of, are you going to die to put them back in the exact same state they've been in, which hasn't been working? Or are you going to try something completely different and maybe just stick with the love vibration this time? He chose the latter, and he didn't trust them, because historically they're not trustworthy when it came to this. If you're going to burn everybody who claims to be the Messiah, how are you ever going to find the Messiah? Right? They're looking for a war, and God is the love vibration.